story we're sharing is about the Vieira Miller case. Bruce Miller was truly a kind man who carried the full weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He worked tirelessly, often without rest, to support his family, never holding back. His life was dedicated to making his wife happy. He was her supporter, her protector, and her source of stability. But in a cruel twist of fate, instead of being rewarded for his dedication and love, he became the victim of a ruthless crime. Bruce fell prey to the dark side of the internet. His feelings for Sherry grew after he hired her and helped raise 3 children with her. They eventually fell in love 2 years later, and this emotion completely consumed him. Bruce decided to adopt her children to create a united family and home for them all together. However, Sherry concealed her true intentions. While Bruce believed in their bright future together, she led a double life and deceived him. The computer Bruce bought for Sherry turned out to be more than just a gift. It became an instrument in her dreadful scheme. Instead of using it for business growth, she used it to plan his murder. Sherry came to realize that divorce wouldn't bring her desired wealth, and so she resorted to drastic measures by manipulating Bruce's feelings and using him as an instrument in her cruel plot. This case could be seen as one of its kind, a pioneering example where online interactions played a critical role in criminal activity. Perhaps this marked one of the first instances when internet communication became pivotal in legal proceedings. A fascinating development indeed. In today's era, such cases are increasingly common compared to times when the internet was nascent and people were unaware that everything they did online could be tracked or restored. Sherry, like many others at that time, had no idea that deleted messages could be recovered later on. It also highlighted how dangerous it is chatting with strangers online and just how much one's life can change due to this form of communication. There are always individuals who find themselves unexpectedly at center stage, plunged into a world full of mystery and intrigue. And Bruce surely counted among those people. A person whose story is packed with secrets and unexpected turns. Born on July 26, 1951, in Flint, Michigan, during his younger years, Bruce worked as a mechanic at a General Motors factory but later changed course, opening his own business, a salvage yard dealing in cars and reselling spare parts. Despite handling large cash sums and dealing with different social groups, he was still known as a generous, kind-hearted individual, though he sometimes even bent the law by falsifying license plates, though this was rarely done. He didn't have many romantic relationships. He followed marriages, both ending in divorce, finally meeting the fate bringing his final love, Sherry Miller. Sherry often displayed unusual habits and behavior, according to her friends. She would act as if she were creating a new identity on the internet while engaging in flirtatious conversations with strangers. People's opinions were divided. Some believed Bruce was aware of it but chose to ignore it, finding it easier to maintain the status quo. Bruce valued his marriage and cherished the stability provided by Sherry, along with his efforts to adopt her 3 children. Sherry also aimed to preserve their marital bond. She had affection for Bruce and appreciated the appealing lifestyle he offered, even after she had misused his credit cards shortly following their wedding. This did not perturb Bruce much. Their relationship was as volatile as Sherry's personal life itself. They maintained a working routine during the day and spent intimate moments at night. Amid this familial bliss, Sherry's online alter ego began to emerge alongside her growing confidence. Her chat interactions became increasingly explicit, often focusing on sexual topics with various men under different aliases such as Horny24 to 21, Love Me Slowly, and I Want to Be Seduced. Rather than sticking with consistent contacts, she preferred engaging with new individuals once boredom set in, initiating cycles of flirting anew each time. As per her own explanation, these interactions were mere playful engagements, a game wherein each new man represented another level of progress that boosted her sense of invincibility. This detached mentality eventually led Sherry down a detrimental path. Amidst her frequent online activities, Sherry encountered Jerry Cassidy, a former police officer residing in Reno, Nevada, and they quickly developed romantic feelings for each other. It seemed Jerry held a special place for Sherry in contrast to previous online acquaintances. Eventually, they even renamed their accounts, Sherry adopting Jerry's Fool, while Jerry took on Sherry's Fool. Their digital exchanges encompassed everything from casual texting and flirting to sharing nude photographs and exchanging sexually suggestive messages and videos featuring explicit content involving Sherry herself. One must remember that all these exchanges took place back in 1999 when executing such actions involved significantly more complexity compared to today's technological advancements. Jerry was born on October 6, 1960, in Kansas City, Missouri. From a young age, he was passionate about hunting and harbored dreams of joining the FBI. He planned to achieve this by starting with the Montana Police. Jerry served as a detective in the homicide department for 9 years, eventually rising to the rank of lieutenant. However, by the end of his tenure, things took a troubling turn. While investigating one case, Jerry uncovered several fraudulent documents within the department. It was clearly an inside job. Acting responsibly, he reported these findings to his superior. Unfortunately, word got out among his colleagues. They branded him a snitch and ostracized him, jeopardizing his career. The situation escalated until it became evident that he was no longer welcome there. After being demoted, Jerry chose to resign from his position in 1994. This had a profoundly negative impact on him. Consequently, he began struggling with alcohol and substance addiction while also battling depression. Not long after these events unfolded, Jerry's wife divorced him. This divorce further affected him, as it resulted in him losing visitation rights with their son. Despite these setbacks, Jerry managed to reclaim some stability by taking up employment as a security officer at the Harris, Kansas City Hotel and Casino. In 1999, he relocated to Reno and found work at another casino there. During this period, Jerry met Sherry through an online platform and soon transitioned their relationship into real-life interactions. Rather than viewing the relationship as a passionate affair, Sherry started to exploit Jerry. Her influence over him became evident to those who knew him well. His observers noted that Jerry seemed to exhibit symptoms akin to bipolar disorder. He was highly enthusiastic when Sherry was around and deeply despondent in her absence. It wasn't long before Sherry began her deceitful manipulations. In September, she falsely declared that she was pregnant with Jerry's child. Shortly after, she claimed that she had miscarried due to Bruce allegedly beating her, though this was entirely untrue. Bruce, in reality, was a diligent family man and not the dangerous individual Sherry depicted him as. Jerry, unaware of the truth, became exceedingly angry. Losing his supposed unborn child and believing Sherry was subjected to violence were unbearable for him, a lot for anyone. Concurrently, Sherry dissuaded Jerry from confronting Bruce by claiming Bruce had significant influential connections and substantial wealth that would ensure they faced retribution if they acted against him. Just 1 month later, Sherry fabricated another story about being pregnant with twins. One crucial detail is that in 1995, Sherry underwent a tubal ligation procedure, which rendered her unable to conceive, but she never disclosed this information to Jerry. This shocking disclosure underscores the extent of deception involved in their relationship. On November 5, 1999, Jerry received a disturbing email that was purportedly from Bruce. The message stated that Sherry was gaining weight due to the 2 unborn children she was carrying and expressed her desire for an abortion to lose the extra pounds. Jerry, filled with anxiety, attempted to reach out to Sherry. He could only manage a brief text conversation in which she mentioned needing to leave for a few days. The following day brought another message, supposedly from Bruce. This time it informed Jerry that Sherry would be returning home soon and implied that the abortion had been completed successfully. However, it also indicated that Sherry would no longer be able to conceive. Enclosed in this communication was a staged photograph showing Sherry covered in bruises. Jerry experienced overwhelming rage. He contacted Sherry the next day, and they concluded that the only solution was to eliminate Bruce. They meticulously planned their approach: routes, a parking spot, and the best location and time for executing their plan at the yard. Driven by his mounting anger, Jerry departed from his home towards Michigan that same evening. As Bruce prepared to leave work later, he received a call from Sherry asking him if he could pick up pizza on his way back, a distraction integral to their plot. Engaged in this phone conversation, Bruce did not notice when Jerry approached him from behind and pointed a .20 caliber gun at him before pulling the trigger. Having committed the crime, Jerry returned home while Sherry set into motion their next phase of cover-up activities. She contacted Bruce's brother, Chuck, expressing concern about Bruce's failure to return home yet. Subsequently, alarmed by her worry, which she feigned, Chuck and his wife rushed over to investigate at the yard where they discovered Bruce's body with horror before dialing authorities. The authorities first suspected a robbery. Bruce's old friend, John Hutchinson, was their primary suspect right away. John owed his employer over $5,000 and had previously been involved with Shaw. His alibi was weak and he failed the polygraph test. No surprise, the police had their doubts about him. Consequently, John was detained for questioning, but due to insufficient evidence, he was eventually released. Subsequently, the case went cold. Officers initially deemed Sherry's behavior after her husband's death appropriate. They were unaware of what she concealed at the time. Shortly thereafter, she was seen enjoying parties frequently. Moreover, she swiftly secured an insurance payout, sold off the business, and withdrew funds from family accounts, thus becoming wealthy overnight. Amidst her festivities and expenditures, she invited her new partner to reside in the house formerly shared with Bruce. Jerry and Sherry's relationship fell apart abruptly after Bruce's death. That was when Jerry discovered Sherry had fallen for another man. He started to feel immense guilt and reflected on the dreadful crime he had committed alongside her. Having worked for the police for many years, Jerry quickly discerned that he was merely a pawn in Sherry's scheme. She manipulated his emotions to eliminate her husband. It dawned on him that Bruce was truly an innocent man. None of the accusations Sherry had fabricated involved abuse, affiliations, beatings, or children. Even the pictures presented as evidence were dated 1994. 3 months later, on February 11th, Jerry Cassidy chose to end his life. He was found alone in the apartment he rented from his cousin with a .22 caliber rifle beside him. Among his belongings were letters to his family and a note and a briefcase addressed to his lawyer, John O'Connor. When John opened the briefcase, he discovered clear evidence of a crime that sealed Sherry's fate. In addition to various pieces of evidence unearthed after Jerry's death, there was also a note where Jerry confessed to killing Bruce and placed all blame squarely on Sherry. The note outlined how all available evidence would be handed over to the police. Jerry expressed deep regret and acknowledged his foolishness in being manipulated by Sherry into committing such an act. He revealed that everyone would now understand why he descended into depression. He had been unable to reveal the truth until now. Jerry also claimed that Sherry aimed solely at securing money and eliminating her husband. She succeeded in her goal but disregarded the harm caused along the way. Following this startling revelation, authorities swiftly apprehended Sherry and charged her with second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The trial commenced 10 months later on December 12th. Given the nature of her internet-related crime, public curiosity was exceptionally high. Sherry pleaded not guilty during the proceedings, and her defense attorney suggested that Jerry had fabricated his evidence against her out of guilt. They also attempted to shift the blame back onto JN. During the trial, disturbing messages between Sherry and JN were presented, wherein they discussed using a firearm. It was highlighted that a day after her husband's death, she altered her first name, last name, and address. After Jerry's demise, she repeated this action. The case concluded successfully in court, and after only 2 days of deliberation, the jury delivered its verdict. Sherry Miller was found guilty of second-degree murder, and on January 9, 2001, she received a life sentence in prison. However, several complaints arose from the defense regarding the trial. One notable issue questioned the admissibility of Jerry's letter as evidence. This concern led to such significant implications that 7 years later in 2008, a judge ordered a retrial for the case. Consequently, as per federal court decisions, Sherry was released from prison in July 2009 until further trials could be conducted. For over 3 years, she walked free without restrictions, even accessing internet and dating sites. However, many individuals, especially Bruce's and Jerry's families, opposed this release, deeming it due to an absurd technicality. Back in August 2012, the district court reversed its decision, and Sherry returned to prison, where she has remained since. While she was at large, Sherry successfully reconnected with her children. This reconnection had a notably positive impact on her. In April 2016, she wrote a letter admitting guilt despite previously denying it. She explained that her initial denial stemmed from fear that an admission would hinder her chances of appealing for a retrial. Her attorneys had advised such action. However, they later denied this claim. They asserted that if they had known about her guilt earlier, they would have recommended pursuing a plea deal. Under such circumstances, Sherry would have faced only 15 years of imprisonment, as opposed to the longer term she is currently serving. By then, Sherry had already spent 2 decades behind bars. Notably, during this time, she entered into her 4th marriage with Michael Denoy. Michael learned about her story through media reports and became interested in her situation, eventually proposing during their first meeting. Raman Raghav, India's Jack the Ripper. Mumbai, also known as Bombay, was the city that never sleeps, but it had once been put to bed early. The slum dwellers and people who didn't hesitate to sleep on the pavement were once made to go into hiding. Bombay police, who captured the underworld by the throat, once fell short of hands to piece this puzzle together. All because there was once a mystified man from Tirunelveli Valley, Tamil Nadu, who had served 5 years in prison for assaulting his sister and stabbing her to death. The man had become a nightmare for people who inhabited the land of dreams and hopes. This is the story of India's Jack the Ripper. Some call him Cindy Dalway, while a few call him Talway. For some, he was Anna, and for the rest, he was Velaswamy. But his name, Raghav Raman, was born in 1929 in the Tirunelveli Valley district of Tamil Nadu. He didn't complete his schooling because of indulging in crimes at a young age. However, his crimes didn't stop there. He assaulted his sister and stabbed her to death with multiple knife wounds, for which he served 5 years in prison. After that, nobody knew where Raghav went or where he lived, till he set foot in Bombay. To know his entire story, we need to go back to the times when Mumbai was Bombay. Holding an umbrella in the streets to protect himself from the unpredictable Bombay rains, a well-groomed man with neatly combed hair, spreading the faint fragrance of coconut oil, appeared a bit obsessive by looking into the mirror that he carried every few minutes. But except for these appearances, Raghav wasn't an ordinary man in Bombay. It happened during the late 60s. The delicate bright mornings in Bombay made people notice the dead bodies that had started piling up in their vicinities. But nobody knew how. It was evident that dwellers near slums, pavement residents, stray animals, or anybody without a suitable home were the potential targets. But no one knew that Raghav did this or that he even existed. Only in the silence of the nights, when the streetlights and suspicions were low, Raghav would come out from the woods to look for anything that moved, so that he would hammer the life out of them. To him, humans weren't humans. They were things that he could smash and crush with blunt objects. He used a regular steel rod to beat human faces, crack their heads, and break their skulls. He also used various handmade weapons to assault as many as night. People along the Central Railway line between 1965 and 1966. Some were beaten to death, but others lived to tell the terrifying story of a small-statured guy. One such eyewitness who reported the incident to the local police was Kritika. She was a relative of one of the victims. She was the one who gave descriptions of the man who beat his victims to death. And Raghav seemed to be a homeless guy who matched the eyewitness's description. So he was summoned. But owing to a lack of proof, Raghav was deported back to the streets. After that, he wasn't suspected. His murder stopped for a while, but the peace was temporary. When the dead began to pile up again in 1968, the investigators were at a loss for how to put this puzzle together. This time, the displeasure of this unknown murderer was felt by more than a dozen victims. Owing to that, Bombay residents were again placed under lockdown. Rumors began to circulate regarding the serial killer's superhuman abilities, and the nightlife of Bombay was overwhelmed with fear. Around the same time, the case was handed over to the Deputy Commissioner of Police, Ramakant Kulkarni. Ramakant, like the rest of the police department, was confused as he went through the files. Nobody knew where to start or where to conclude their hunt. Therefore, it was impractical and nearly impossible to conduct a citywide search because no one knew who they were searching for. So the citywide search was ruled out. While hunting for leads, DCP Kulkarni began documenting the locations of the murders. They found a followed pattern similar to the 1965 to 1966 homicides. The victims were frequently hacked to death near the jungle shadows. And before 1965, it was along the Central Railway line near the eastern suburbs. And during 1968, it was in the northern suburbs. This remark attracted Kulkarni's interest and he began looking through Raghav's papers, suspecting Raghav of being involved in this series of murders. Karni issued a warning to his force to keep an eye out for Raghav and bring him in for interrogation. Sub-Inspector Alex Vilaljo was one among the cops who were called in and given Raghav's files and records. Neither cops nor the victims believed that this man would put an end to the cold-blooded murders of India's Jack the Ripper. A police manhunt involving 2,000 officers was underway around the city. Every member of the task team was handed a photo of Raghav. They conducted an intense hunt in every nook and corner of the city. His photograph was published in the press and a request for assistance and information. It was a gigantic mission in a massive metropolis, and locating Raghav was a long shot, unless he made a mistake. And that's precisely what he did. When Vilaljo was waiting at a bus stop in South Bombay, he noticed a person was carrying a wet umbrella. But it was not raining there, which raised the suspicions of the sub-inspector. Philo didn't know what made him look at the individual, but he found this man in khaki shorts and a long blue shirt walking in his direction. He asked the man where he was coming from, and he replied, Malad, a place in the western suburbs where the murders had happened. It strengthened his doubt since the man was walking in the wrong direction from that place. The man was also carrying half-rimmed spectacles and a thimble that resembled a particular tailor's who was murdered in Malad a couple of days ago. The sub-inspector put the puzzles together. And finally, Philo arrested Raghav in front of a handful of credible witnesses. Raghav's things comprised commonplace objects, including spectacles, 2 combs, pair of scissors, a stand for lighting incense, soap, garlic, tea dust, and 2 pieces of paper with mathematical figures. His clothing was blood-stained and his fingerprints matched those on the dead victims. Finally, Raman Raghav was convicted. The police were able to put a face to the 40-plus murders for the first time. Raman's story, however, did not finish there. His confession was as mysterious as the murders that he had carried out. Raman refused to answer any questions for weeks following his arrest. His lips were locked regardless of whether he was being beaten or punished. Out of all the tactics in the book, a chicken dish was the one that made Raman talk. He asked the cops for having the chicken curry after his arrest. After weeks of questioning, the cops decided to agree with his request. After completing his entire chicken curry meal, Raman told the police to ask him whatever questions they wanted. Before the cops knew all they wanted, they had to fulfill a few more wishes though. But finally, Raghav admitted to murdering 41 people. Following his confession, he accompanied the police on a citywide tour to show them the locations where he worked and to retrieve the rod he had hidden in the northern suburbs. Raghav was sentenced to death for his crime, but his defense argued that he was mentally incapable of making conscious judgments and did not realize his actions were illegal. Raghav was referred to a special medical board of 3 psychiatrists by the Bombay High Court due to this. When a panel of doctors examined him at the directive of the High Court, they found that he would never be cured of his kidney failure as well. So the High Court reduced his sentence to life imprisonment in their judgment on August 4, 1987. He was lodged at Yerwada Central Jail in Pune. He was also under treatment at the Central Institute of Mental Health and Research. In 1995, Raghav died at Sassoon Hospital due to kidney failure. It has been decades since these incidences happened, and yet Raman Raghav remains as India's Jack the Ripper. K.D. Kapima, India's first convicted female serial killer. Over a time period of 3 months, 5 women were discovered dead on the outskirts of Bangalore. There were no marks on their bodies and no sexual or physical violence evidence. Cops were confused until the autopsy entered the play. According to the victim's autopsy report, cyanide was in their system. Who do you suspect committed these assassinations? What may be the reason behind this? Most people imagine a male with wrong reasons as the murderer of these women. But you would be wrong. Yes, this is the story of India's first convicted female serial killer. The mastermind behind the cyanide was K.D. Keppimma, also known as Cyanide Malika. Here's the story of how she got her name. K.D. Keppimma of Karnataka is India's first female serial killer. She is accused of being responsible for the deaths of 6 women in the state of Karnataka between 1998 and 2007. After her first murder, she is thought to have taken a 7-year sabbatical. The fact that a woman murdered these victims astonished the investigating authorities for a long time, thanks to chauvinistic mentalities. This isn't a scary story by any means. Actually, on the contrary, this is a narrative of greed and ambition. It is the story of a humble lady who was so ambitious that nothing could stand in her way, not even human lives. Born in 1970, Kagali Pura Keppimma and her family lived in the suburbs of Bangalore. They were a simple family leading an everyday life like most other families in the village. Keppimma was always ambitious. She had always been attracted to a more lavish lifestyle. She always thought of pursuing the quickest path to her goals. Her ambitions never changed even after she grew. When she was a teenager, Keppimma married a tailor and became a mother soon after. She had 2 more children after that. However, Keppimma was dissatisfied with life's offerings. She wanted more and much more. She served as a house helper in the place that she was born. Yet her earnings didn't satisfy her. So, Keppimma decided to become wealthy overnight and began stealing from the homes where she worked as a helper. Following this, she decided to establish a chit fund near her house to assist her in achieving her objectives, which she finally accomplished. However, as a result, the chit funds experienced significant losses because of Keppimma. This resulted in the family of 5 being buried in debt. Keppimma's husband threw her out of the house in a rage. In 1998, he deserted her. She was forced to search for new sources to create money after losing her business. While she was looking for a source of money, she found cheating ladies in distress to be the easiest. She eventually found work at a jewel shop after working as a helper for a period of time. However, it too did not work out in the end. Her employment at the jewel shop, on the other hand, was not in vain. She also had discovered a one-way ticket to wealth in the shape of cyanide. Keppimma claims that she learned about cyanide and its usage as a poison from the movies that she viewed. However, while cyanide was a copied notion, the remainder of the method was unique. So Keppimma came up with a great murderous plan to get wealthy in only a few days. And her plan was to capture ladies visiting the temple. Every day, Keppimma would visit the temple to keep a closer eye on what was there. She remained focused on the regulars, who appeared to be in a lot of discomfort. When the timing was perfect, she would approach them as holy women and listen to their troubles. She would be well aware of their distress and desires. She would say that she decided to help them out by performing a ritual, which would fix all of their issues. She would also ask them to wear their most valuable clothes and jewelry to the ritual. Keppimma would frequently invite them to a temple on the outskirts of town that they had never visited before. After that, she'd ask them to close their eyes and pray. They had no clue that it would be their final blink of the eye. Then she'd bring them holy water, which was cyanide-laced water. And that was her modus operandi for all of her victims. Cyanide Malika's first victim was a 30-year-old rich woman, Mamata Rajan, living on the outskirts of Bengaluru in 1999. After that, Keppimma's attention was pulled to precious goods regularly. In the month of October 2007, Elizabeth became her second victim. Elizabeth was a woman who was on the search for her missing granddaughter. Keppimma called her to Kabalama Temple, formed her ritual, and murdered her. Her third victim was 60-year-old Yashodama, who suffered from asthma. In December of 2007, with the promise of curing the same, Keppimma brought her to Siddhaganga and murdered her. Muniyama was Keppimma's fourth target, who wished to be a devotional singer. Unfortunately, she was murdered at a temple in Yadavar, a short distance from Bangalore. Keppimma's fifth victim, Paloma, was a priest at a temple in Hibble. Keppimma promised her that she would sponsor the building of a new arch for the temple and murdered Paloma at a temple close to Manja. The sixth and final victim of Cyanide Malika was a poor, childless woman who only wanted a son. Her name was Nagveni, and she was murdered in her sleep. Kabama was caught and arrested on December 31st, 2008, at a bus stop in an attempt to sell the jewelry that she had taken off of her victims. Unfortunately, many other jewels belonging to her other victims were also found. She was eventually given the death penalty for her murders, which was later commuted to a life sentence. While Kipama was convicted for the cold-blooded murders of these 6 women, it is believed that she may have killed other women too. This might have included a young woman called Renuka, wanted to give birth to a son but could not. The profile fit Kempama's modus operandi, but this was not proven. A few other women had also gone missing, some of whose bodies were found in 2009 and further connected to Kempama. Her victims were older ladies going through difficult moments in their lives, and Kempama would take on a new identity after each murder. She was first arrested by Baidati police in 2001. She tried to rob jewelry from a house where she went to perform a ritual. Kabama was taken to the interrogation there, but the relatives found her and she was rescued. She, however, was sentenced to 6 months in jail for her crime. As a result, she was released after 6 months of imprisonment. After her first murder, Kabama was reported to have gone 7 years without getting engaged in another. There are claims that she murdered many people during this period. This also remains a mystery. She admitted to her crimes when the police arrested her, but this was not the end, as Kabama was again convicted for multiple murders. She was consecutively given the death sentence in 2010 and 2012 for the murders of Munyama and Nagveni respectively. But her punishment for Nagveni's death was commuted to a life in prison, as only circumstantial evidence was found against her. Kepama became the first woman to be given the death penalty in Karnataka. In 2017, Kempama again hit the headlines when she became the jailmate of VK Sashikala, a confidant of late Supremo Jai Jailasha. It was alleged that Kempama tried to meet Sashikala several times, due to which she was shifted to another jail as she posed a threat to Sashikala. Malika's cyanide is still a mystery. Although we sometimes try to rationalize murders by looking back in time to identify anything that went horrifically wrong during the killer's formative years, Cyanide Malika's early life provides no such clues, as there is little to no information about that period. The circumstances surrounding the killings, on the other hand, lead us to think that she was motivated entirely by financial gain. However, Cyanide Malika remains to be India's first convicted female serial killer. Amarjit Sada, the world's youngest serial killer. No matter how many different types of serial killers there are, it is unbelievable that an 8-year-old child would get addicted to murder and pleasure. Psychologists and sociologists continue to be amazed by this little boy from Bihar. He murdered 3 children one by one without guilt at such a young age. But on the contrary, he threw an innocent smile. The cops asked him about the murder. Here is the story of the world's youngest serial killer. What precisely did that Bihari kid do? Unfortunately, we'll have to travel back to over a decade to find out. Amarjit, born in 1996, had already committed 3 murders at the age of 8. Born in the village of Mushahar, Bihar, the kid experienced a childhood much like other children around him. However, none of the people around him knew that he would commit such heinous crimes. Some people speculate that as his father was a laborer, he forced Amarjit to work from a very early age. Considering that the family was poor, abuse must have taken place that led to the nurturing of Amarjit's psychopathic and sadistic tendencies. Amarjit seemed to find joy in picking out victims he had easy access to and would strangle them to death. What is more horrific is that the families and the villagers knew about the murders that Amarjit had been committing, but chose to remain silent, deeming them as internal familial issues. As a result, they didn't realize that Amarjit's killing spree would soon show its marks outside of his family, and his cousin, Couchboo, was among one of his victims. Amarjit's distant aunt, Chun Shindevi, said she had left her daughter Kushboo to sleep at her village primary school while attending household chores and returned to find that she had disappeared. After the news spread, people started to fear the worst, and knowing about Amarjit's past and his easy access to Kushboo, they confronted him. When villagers confronted Amarjit, he alleged to have confessed to the murder. leading them to where he had attempted to conceal the body in a shallow grave. After his arrest, police said the boy had then confessed to the murder of his 8-month-old sister 3 months ago and his 6-month-old cousin, the daughter of a maternal uncle, almost a year ago. As he was being questioned, Amarjit showed no guilt and cheerfully told the villagers about how he strangled the child to death and led them to the shallow grave where she was buried. Excitedly, he told them, "I killed her by beating her using a brick." He told them that he quickly covered her remains in the grass around the area and left for his house after she was dead. After confessing, Amarjit was arrested for the murder of Khushbu Devi. Unfortunately, because his first 2 victims' murders were covered up by his family, he was never proven guilty. Despite this, he was interrogated and asked questions about how and why he assaulted his victims. His response would send shivers down anyone. Yet Amarjit Sada merely smiled at the officers and asked for more biscuits when confronted about the deaths. He showed no guilt, and if he was pointed in the direction of his horrible actions, he would stop talking and grin. As it became evident that this was a clear example of child psychopathy, the superintendent, Amir Lodha, ordered that Amarjit's case should be investigated from a psychiatric standpoint. Soon after, Shamshad Hussain, Patna-based psychotherapist, investigated Amarjit's case, concluding that this was a case of a youngster who lacked apparent guilt and had a great passion for inflicting pain on others. And he also said that it was a concrete example of psychopathy. Amarjit appeared to have a brain abnormality that caused a chemical imbalance, leading to enhanced enjoyment from inflicting harm on others. In addition, he was diagnosed with a hereditary behavior disorder, and caused him to commit acts of violence since he had no sense of right or wrong. Finally, Amarjit was prosecuted as a juvenile, and it is believed that under Indian law he was sentenced to only 3 years in juvenile jail, as no kid may be condemned to more than that. He was sent to a mental health care center after serving his sentence because of his mental state and the grave threat that he posed to society. The whereabouts of Amarjit Sada remain unknown. However, in 2015, he contacted the Post-Mortem Post and claimed to be at a children's facility in India where he was meant to reside until he became 18 years old. Amarjit Sada is about 26 years old now. He is expected to be living a new life under a new identity. No one knows where he is or what he does. Can hope that he has received the treatment he needs and can live life like an average person by staying at the Raman home. While it's unclear whether he'll commit more crimes or if his child's psychopathy was treated at the time of his conviction, it is safe to assume that Amarjit Sada's case is unique and that it involved not only premeditated infant murders, but also elaborate plans to hide their bodies so that he wouldn't be caught. It's terrifying to think that an 8-year-old child did this. Some argued that Amarjit was not the original perpetrator and was framed for the murders, since the magnitude of the crime and the complex nature of the body hideouts could not have been committed by an 8-year-old child. Now this argument has some credibility since no examples of psychotic youngsters who not only killed their victims but also went to tremendous measures to conceal the corpse and evidence have been documented. Despite this plausible conspiracy theory, the fact that he was very excited to show the bodies and knew precisely where they were, as well as his smile when asked about the murders, seems to point us in the direction of Amarjit Sada being India's and the world's youngest and most infamous serial killer. Renuka Shinde and Seema Gavit, the first women in India to receive the death sentence. The story of Renuka Shinde and Seema Gavit is a famous example of how parenting can go drastically wrong. And these 2 sisters gave the term heartless a whole new meaning. This is the story of the first women in India to be hanged for their heinous crimes. A good parent, one who puts their kids above their own selfish needs and wants. It's not a job, it's a choice. But meet Anhanyabai, who neither considered parenting a gift nor a responsibility. She was an exceptional mother who ruined the entire lifetime of her daughters besides destroying many other kids' lives. There wouldn't have been any story about Renuka Shinde and Seema Gavit if Anana didn't enter the play. Yes, it all began with Anjana. She had no life skills other than pickpocketing and grabbing jewelry in busy areas. It was how she managed to get by for so many years. But one day, this cold-eyed criminal was arrested for 125 petty theft cases, including pickpocketing and snatching people's gold chains from around their necks at railway stations. She said that she had become a thief only after her first husband, a truck driver, deserted her after the birth of Renuka. She then married Mohan Gavit, and they had a daughter, Seema Gavit. But indeed, at a point after their marriage, Mohan became sick of having continual conflict with the cops for petty thievery because Inhana had roughly so many cases filed against her. Mohan hoped that getting Renuka married would at least make Inhana understand her responsibilities. So in 1989, they married Renuka to Kiran Shinde, who was working as a tailor near Shar-Edi. But even after Renuka's marriage, Inhana didn't change. Instead, she started to ruin Renuka's life by leading her into petty crimes. Not being able to tolerate Inhana's activities in 1990, Mohan divorced her and left Seema with her. He then got married to a lady named Pratibha. Mohan knew that Inhana was extremely angered because of the marriage, but little did he know about the influence of Inhana over Renuka and Seema. What began as a revenge strategy for Mohan leaving, Inhana quickly turned it into manic kidnappings for her selfish gain. Neither Inhana nor her daughters could forget Mohan leaving them. Though Inhana did these petty crimes for her living, she couldn't let Mohan live a happy life with his wife. So in November 1996, Inhana, along with her daughters, Renuka and Seema, planned to kidnap and murder Mohan's 9-year-old daughter, Kranti, and they succeeded in that plan. Mohan and Pratibha reported their kid's disappearance. They both were sure that only Inhana and her daughters could do this to Kranti. The inspectors assigned to the investigation confirmed their suspicions as well. A search team was sent to their house in Nashik. They uncovered evidence of more kidnapping, including discarded clothing of Kranti, confirming that they had murdered her. They also found a mysterious presence of several children in photos of Renuka's children's birthday party celebrations. They didn't seem to be locals. Nashik police quickly figured out that the 3 women were a pickpocketing gang, also involved in petty crimes. But who were the children? The investigation of the children's identity led them to find that Kranti wasn't the only one they murdered. Jadashrinji Temple, a famous religious place in Pune, was where the actual story of Renuka Shinde and Seema Mohan Gavit took a sinister turn. And Renuka's son Sudhir was the catalyst for their initiative in these crimes. It was 1990. One day, the 3 women went with Renuka's son Sudhir to a temple. It was the first time the trio had gotten into some trouble. Besides being a kid, Sudhir had attempted to pickpocket someone, which turned the eyes of the crowd towards Renuka and Sudhir. But she turned her child into a shield, telling the crowd that a mother with a kid would never steal. These words from the mother made the angry crowd stay calm, and finally the crowd let them go. This incident made Inhana take a child with them whenever the group committed a robbery. Instead of Renuka's kids, they chose newborns and young children from busy areas like temples or marketplaces. Then when they finished their thefts, or if the infant opened its mouth and made any sound, they would either leave or murder the child. Their first victim was Santosh, who was just 18 months old. Renuka kidnapped him from a female beggar in Kohalpur. The trio took him to Kohalpur and went to a temple. When Seema tried to snatch a wallet and was caught by the male victim, he began beating her, and Hannah deliberately threw Santos to the ground to create a distraction. Unfortunately, the child sustained a head injury due to her monstrous acts. The crowd empathized with the kid's cry and consoled the trio, so their theft went unreported to the police. The trio then moved on to a bus stop and stole 3 more purses with injured Santosh. They didn't even care to offer first aid to the kid. Due to his bleeding head wound, the poor kid continued to cry. Hannah decided the boy was of no further use and might attract the attention of the police. So she mercilessly struck him with an iron pole until he was dead and then washed her clothes of blood. They took his body to our rickshaw stand and disposed of it, fleeing back to their hostel. This was only the start of their horrible actions. They kidnapped dozens of kids between 1990 and 1996 and then discarded them when they had served their purpose. The majority of them were beaten to death, their skulls smashed in, or thrown down flights of stairs, among other things. In 1991, they kidnapped 9-month-old Naresh, who was starved and beaten to death because he cried too much, while an 18-month-old Bhavna was bundled into a handbag and left in a cinema's restroom. In 1993, the trio abducted a 1-year-old child named Buntai and a 2-year-old girl Swati from Kalyan railway station in Mumbai, and a 2-year-old boy, Gudu, from another Mumbai station. 3 women murdered Bunty and Guru and disposed of their bodies. In 1994, they kidnapped another 2-year-old kid named Anjali and Nashik. They murdered her and disposed of the body. Kiran, Renuka Shinde's husband, had no other choice than to help the trio dispose of the body. In 1995, they kidnapped a boy named Raja from a bus stop in Kohalpur and murdered him as well. They kidnapped Pankajma Mankar, age 4. When they found that the boy was talking to the passers-by about his parents, the ladies killed him by hanging him upside down from a ceiling and slamming his skull against a wall. That was in 1996. According to Kerwin Shinde, these ladies were ruthless and had no guilt for their actions, and authorities linked the photographs to the slew of kidnappings and murders involving children in Kohalpur, Nashik, and Pune districts to the trio of the sisters and their mother. All of them, including Kiran Shinde, were arrested. Despite this, Kiran received a pardon in exchange for collaborating with the authorities and providing all of the information they needed. Seema Govind was just 25 and Renuka Shinde was 29 during their arrest in 1996. While Anna died of sickness shortly after her arrest, the other 2 were found guilty of murdering 5 children and abducting 13 children. Despite filing a mercy petition in 2014, which India's former president Pranab Mukherjee denied, the sisters are presently on execution row. In reviewing the mercy appeal brought by half-sisters, the Bombay High Court postponed its judgment on December 23, 2021. Bombay High Court commuted the half-sisters' execution sentence to life imprisonment on January 18, 2022. Thug Bairam, Yellow Hanker chief serial killer. The darkest and quietest hour of India's late 18th century nights became the deadliest nightmare for people. Many knew that travelers who were on the roads during the night disappeared without a trace. But unfortunately, no one was sure what had happened to them. That fear drove travelers to stick together seeking safety. But that was precisely what the thugs wanted. And no one knows how many people met their end this way. This is the story of the Yellow Handkerchief serial killer. Tracing back to the historic roots of serial homicide, roughly between the mid-1600s and the mid-1800s, travelers in India had an unshakable fear. Roads were unsafe and the coasts reigned supreme across the main provinces of the subcontinent at that time. The reputation of the unsafe roads were a driving force in creating an atmosphere of horror and fear among the people for centuries. It was during this time when a shy and silent kid, born in 1765, would turn into one of the biggest threats to the common people in 18th century India. And his name was Bhairav. A 25-year-old gangster named Said Amir Ali had met Bairam at some point in his life and trained the kid to become a thug. Bairam started to attack and murder people when he was just 10. By the time he himself was 25, he had engaged himself in the world of robberies and assassinations. Bairam eventually became the leader of the gangs that murdered and looted the travelers on the roads across the subcontinent. They were a gang of over 200 thugs who worshipped Kali, the Hindu goddess of death. Bairam and his companions felt that they had to make sacrifices to please their goddess so that they could prevent the world from being destroyed. Years in the life of crime made Bairam and the gang pretty clever in their work. These men would resemble the physical appearance of the traveler, wearing turbans and carrying some luggage. And their idea was to loot a lot, without getting caught. Sometimes the gang even used poison that would induce drowsiness, making it easy for them to loot their victims. While they were there in the jungle before attacking the men on the roads, the gang members would communicate by imitating the jackal's cry. They also kept different code languages, including a word called Ramos, which they used before assaulting their victims. Once they determined a person to loot, these men divided themselves into 3 groups. One group would hold the victim's feet down, another group would hold the head down, and the third would do the final murdering. Finally, they would wrap a cloth around the victim's neck and strangle him to death. Now we mention the victims as a he in particular because the gang avoided murdering women and children. After all, it was a sacrifice to their deity who was a goddess. Now the moment they robbed the men they had slain was no longer for their goddess. It was more to fulfill Thug Bairam's unquenchable thirst than for any deity or goddess. So he started to commit murders to quench his own bloodthirst. But wait, how could a yellow handkerchief be the cause of death? Well, Bahram was an exceptionally gifted strangler, so his weapon of choice for murdering was a yellow handkerchief. But it doesn't sound too deadly compared to a large knife or gun, does it? Maybe that's why Bahram would have turned the handkerchief into a clever murder weapon. Thug Bahram employed the same way of murdering his victims almost every single time. He was said to strangle his victims to death using his handkerchief and a medallion. He could throw this medallion around the victim's Adam's apple, which allowed him to strangle people with deadly force. After that, he disposed of the remains and wells. He would have murdered at least 150 people in this manner, but he witnessed many more murders taking place right in front of his eyes. During his initial days of crime, Bahram was also accompanied by a female thug named Dolly, but later on, both were separated. Bahram gave new meaning to words like brutality, thugs, and notorious. People throughout central India had heard about the disappearances that occurred regularly, and eventually it attracted the attention of the British authorities. They reacted to these unexplained incidents by assigning detectives to find out what was happening. Of course, Bahram murdered these detectives, but not before they discovered that a guy named Thug Bahram existed. The British didn't expect to find the detectives dead, and so the British sent a man into India who entirely changed the face of gangsterism in the nation, William Henry Sleeman. This man is almost single-handedly responsible for curbing organized crime in 18th century British India. He announced that any thug who agreed to be an informant for them would have been granted immunity. When authorities met people and informed them about this immunity, Sleeman had got a lead about said Amir Ali's location. Finally, the Britishers reached his house, but by then Said had escaped from there. But his mother and other family members were arrested by the Britishers promptly. For the sake of his family, in 1832, Said Amir Ali surrendered. And after many inquiries, he gave clear information about Bahram to the Britishers. After a couple of years, and his gang were finally captured in 1838. After the arrest, Bahram revealed that he, along with his group members, had killed nearly 931 victims with the help of yellow handkerchiefs and medallions, of which Bahram personally murdered 150. After narrating the stories of his crimes, the other members of his group were also arrested by the Britishers. Finally, in 1838, he was hung at a tree at Jabalpur, Madhya Pradesh. Sleeman gave a concession to Benham's new gang members by sending all of them to the Jabalpur's reformatory. People in central India were so relieved by what transpired afterward that they named a town near Jabalpur after Sleeman, named Sleemanabad. Simply put, Thug Bahram's and his people's narrative is yet another tale of human sacrifice taken to an extreme, all in the name of religion. Bahram was the leader of the Thuggee cult, which has its name in the Guinness Book of World Records for its 931 victims. And arrestingly, all of the gold, silver, and precious stones he stole and buried have not been recovered yet. The location of his priceless loot remains a mystery. In 2013, Jessica Herringer, a 25-year-old woman, disappeared under circumstances from her workplace. The search for her kidnapper spanned several years, during which numerous other women were affected. When the authorities finally apprehended the culprit by chance, they uncovered deeply disturbing details about him. Jessica Herringer was born on July 16, 1987, and resided in Norton Shores, Michigan. She grew up in a modest family with a sister. At 22, Jessica became a mother to a son named Zinn, fathered by her long-term partner Dakota Quayle Dyer. They were still together in 2013, living in a leased home. At the age of 25, Jessica worked at an Exxon gas station in Norton Shores, located near Lake Michigan. Known for her warm and friendly nature as a manager, she often received praise from customers. To support her cherished 3-year-old son, she frequently took on extra hours. Jessica's diary highlighted her ambitions to learn and advance. She aspired to pursue college studies in accounting, but financial constraints hindered this goal. Dakota was unable to fully support their family, leading to frequent disputes and turmoil in their relationship. The couple was engaged, yet their marriage faced repeated delays due to various factors. On the evening of April 26, 2013, Jessica Herringer was carrying out her regular duties at the Exxon gas station. Her day began with a visit to a nearby store around 3 p.m., followed by a drive to her workplace. She arrived at the gas station around 4:35 p.m., parked her car and started her night shift, which was supposed to end at 11:30 p.m. Jessica was the sole employee on duty that night. At 11:14 p.m., a customer called emergency services reporting his experience at the Exxon station. He had entered the store to pay for his gas in cash but found it unattended. He informed the dispatcher, "I'm not sure what's going on, but there's no one at the station. The door is open and unlocked. Lights are still on, but there's no one to take my payment. There are just my car and another vehicle outside. Why isn't anyone here? It looks very odd." The police reached the Exxon gas station within 10 minutes of the 911 call. During their inspection of the premises, both inside and outside, they found no evidence of a struggle. Everything seemed orderly. Jessica's coat was in the back room, along with her purse containing $400, car and house keys. A solitary drop of blood, later identified as Jessica's, was discovered near the storage area's back door. Additionally, from a Walther P22 semi-automatic pistol's laser sight and 2 batteries, likely for a watch, were found on the floor. The gas station's cash register remained undisturbed with all the money intact. The last recorded transaction was at 10:52 p.m. for a lighter. The facility lacked interior surveillance cameras. Positioned next to the cash register was Jessica's pack of cigarettes, suggesting she had briefly left her station with the intention of returning soon. Her locked car was parked outside, but Jessica was nowhere to be seen. She had inexplicably disappeared. Upon discovering the station unattended, police reached out to the gas station's owner, informing them of the situation. The owner subsequently contacted another manager living close by, requesting her to secure the premises. Additionally, the police notified Jessica's family of her disappearance. Her parents sought clues to her whereabouts and called her friends. One friend recalled being at the gas station between 8 to 9 p.m. that day, noting that all appeared normal then. Shortly after, a fellow employee arrived to lock up the station. This colleague recounted that around 11 p.m., she and her boyfriend had driven by the station on a motorcycle. They spotted a silver Chrysler Town and Country minivan parked near the rear service door with its back door open. Suspecting Jessica might be involved in theft from the station, they paused to observe further developments. The manager observed a young man with disheveled wavy hair near the minivan dressed in an orange sweatshirt. She saw him repeatedly open and close the vehicle's rear door before he finally drove off. Police reviewing surveillance footage from surrounding buildings located a video showing a silver Chrysler passing by Exxon gas station at 11:02 p.m. A store employee nearby also spoke to the police, mentioning that he had seen the man in the minivan conversing with Jessica Christian. The employee initially thought the stranger was merely flirting with Jessica, given her attractiveness. He noted Jessica standing outside while the man questioned why she wasn't inside. Both Christian and Jessica's colleague, who had spotted the man by the minivan, contributed to creating a composite sketch of the unidentified individual. He was depicted as a light-complexioned young male with dark wavy hair, a stocky build, and approximately 1.82 m in height. The sketch was released 3 days following Jessica's disappearance. Despite numerous calls received by police in response, no significant leads emerged from the information provided. The prevalence of the silver Chrysler minivan in the United States posed a considerable obstacle in the investigation. In Michigan alone, there were approximately 15,000 vehicles of this kind registered. Identifying the specific driver of the minivan linked to Jessica Hinger's disappearance became a daunting challenge given the vast number of identical models. Initially, Jessica's boyfriend Dakota Quayle D was a suspect in her disappearance. He acknowledged their frequent arguments, but denied ever physically harming her. Dakota actively cooperated with the investigation, informing police that he was at home with their 3-year-old son on the night Jessica vanished. Without access to a car, he couldn't have traveled to her workplace, and his phone records, once verified by detectives, confirmed his presence at home that evening. This led to his exclusion from the suspect list. The investigation revealed that Jessica had numerous admirers due to her amiable and outgoing personality, which sometimes led to misunderstandings. One such admirer was Jess Ammerman, a 37-year-old married plumber. He visited Jessica at the gas station around 9:30 p.m. on the day she disappeared and confessed his love and willingness to divorce his wife for her. However, Jessica rebuffed his advances, then left the station and called his wife. They spoke for about 50 minutes before he returned home. Following his interrogation, a polygraph test, and an interview with his wife, Jess Ammerman was also eliminated as a suspect. Rob Follett, the brother of the Exxon gas station's manager, subsequently emerged as another individual involved in this case, though context-wise specifics about Rob's involvement were not provided. Identified as the next suspect, he mentioned visiting the gas station around 9 p.m. on the day Jessica disappeared. Upon greeting her, he noticed she seemed downcast. Asking about her mood, Jessica confided in having family troubles. Rob suggested she could stay with him, but she declined. After a short while at the station and making a purchase, Rob left for a night fishing trip at the lake. Detectives checked Rob's phone records for that evening, which corroborated his account of leaving the gas station for fishing. Consequently, Rob Follett was eliminated from the suspect list. Search and rescue operations for Jessica Haringa were launched using helicopters, expertly trained canines, and extensive searches of residential and commercial properties, woods, and Lake Michigan. Despite these exhaustive efforts, no leads were found, leading to an impasse in the case. Nearly a year later, in February 2014, a similar event occurred in Michigan. A small blonde, bespectacled woman was assaulted by a man while returning home late at night. She was kidnapped, taken to his apartment, and attacked. Despite threats to her life, she was released after several hours. The perpetrator was identified as 42-year-old Brad Allen Mason. Mason was swiftly located, but resisted arrest by brandishing a fake firearm at police officers, resulting in his fatal shooting. Mason had a history of criminal activity, including a 2004 kidnapping conviction and a 2011 arrest for indecent exposure. In 2014, he resided in a dormitory opposite the Exxon gas station where Jessica worked. However, investigators found no evidence linking Mason to Jessica's disappearance. 2 years after Jessica Haringa's disappearance, in 2016, another incident involving a young woman occurred late at night. Returning from a party at a friend's house, she became disoriented on a dark street. A man in a silver minivan approached her asking if she was okay and offering her a ride. She refused but requested to use his phone instead. The man consented, but only if she entered the minivan. Once inside, he locked the door and revealed his phone battery was dead, then brandished a gun, instructing her to stay silent. These cases highlight ongoing challenges faced by law enforcement in solving abduction instances, despite rigorous investigative efforts and community cooperation. He then began driving, feeling sick and nauseated. The woman requested him to lower the window. Seizing the opportunity, she leaped out of the moving vehicle through the window and fled to a nearby house. The man sped away. The victim immediately contacted the police and described kidnapper. Through surveillance footage, the police managed to trace the license plate of the silver Chrysler Town and Country. They identified the driver as 46-year-old Jeffrey Willis. Jeffrey Willis, a factory laborer, led a secluded, modest life and had no prior legal issues. When located in his minivan, police searched and found a Walther P22 semi-automatic pistol. The gun was traced back to a colleague of Jeff, who had reported her laser-sighted gun stolen some time ago. Willis was arrested and detained. A search of his residence uncovered a box filled with various BDSM paraphernalia, including handcuffs, chains, rogues, gags, a vibrator, a video camera, and a bullet matching a Walther P22. The box also contained insulin syringes with an unidentified liquid, sedatives, Viagra, lubricant, disposable gloves, and a diagram of a woman's anatomy with marked injection sites. On his computer were numerous videos depicting appalling kidnapping scenes with young women as victims. A hidden hard drive in a ventilation duct contained footage Willis had recorded of his female neighbors swimming without their knowledge. A folder titled Victims on the computer held 2 subfolders, one named for the missing Jessica Haringa and another for a murdered woman named Rebecca. Rebecca Blech, age 36, was tragically murdered on June 29, 2014, roughly a year after Jessica Herringer vanished in an area just 20 minutes from where Jessica worked at the Exxon gas station. Rebecca went out for an evening run, but never made it back home. She was found by neighbors lying on the road with her clothing disheveled, initially leading to the belief that she was struck by a car. Although unconscious, Rebecca still had a pulse when discovered. Emergency services were called, but she succumbed to her injuries before they could save her. Autopsy reports revealed she died from 3 gunshot wounds to her back and head, with multiple bruises on her wrists and legs. At the time of her death, the perpetrator remained at large. However, 2 years after Jeffrey Willis's arrest, new evidence linked Rebecca's murder to a pistol found in Willis's minivan. Willis denied any involvement, but prosecutors theorized that he had attempted to abduct Rebecca and bring her to his home. When Rebecca resisted, Willis reportedly shot her and fled. Forensic analysis later discovered Rebecca's DNA on a glove recovered from Willis's residence. Jeffrey Willis was convicted of Rebecca Bletch's murder and received a life sentence. While serving his sentence, he faced additional charges related to the kidnapping of Jessica Herringer. Despite consistently denying any involvement in Jessica's disappearance, phone records showed that on the night she vanished, he was present at the Exxon gas station where she was last seen. Subsequently, he traveled to his deceased grandfather's house, which is roughly 13 minutes from the station. Upon arriving at his grandfather's residence, police encountered a heavily secured front door. Forced entry revealed an assortment of cleaning products, powders, and bleachers. In the basement, the manufacturing dates on these items aligned with early 2013, matching the time frame of Jessica's disappearance. Colleagues recalled that Jeffrey Willis was notably absent on April 27, 2013, the day following Jessica hearing his disappearance. When he returned to work a few days later, he had conspicuous deep scratches on his face and hands, raising further suspicions among those who knew him. A woman who visited the gas station on April 25th, the day before Jessica's disappearance, later contacted police. She arrived late in the evening and expressed concern about being there alone at such an hour to Jessica herself. Jessica nodded in acknowledgement, appearing anxious and somewhat scared. At that moment, an unknown man inside the station reassured the visitor by saying, "Don't worry, she has customers who look after her." He left the premises. The concerned visitor, still worried about Jessica's safety, stayed in her car outside until Jessica finished her shift and headed home. Tragically, Jessica disappeared the following day in 2016. The witness from the gas station positively identified Jeffrey Willis, recalling seeing him there. Investigators learned that Willis had frequented the Exxon gas station, interacting with Jessica Herringer on at least 15 occasions. 48-year-old Kevin Bloom, Willis's cousin and a prison guard, was taken into custody. Kevin's inconsistent statements during interrogation eventually led to a confession. He disclosed information about Rebecca Bletch's death that hadn't been publicly known. Kevin also confessed to assisting Jeffrey in concealing Jessica's body. He described how on April 27th, the day after Jessica's abduction, Jeffrey invited him over for a party at his house. Upon arriving at his late grandfather's residence, Kevin saw Jessica for the first time lying on the floor bound and lifeless. The cousins wrapped her body in a sheet, transported it in a car to a forest where Jeffrey had pre-dug a grave and buried her. They then returned home. When Kevin Bloom led the police to the forest to identify the burial site of Jessica Herringer's body, he spent a considerable amount of time wandering through the area. Despite his efforts, he was unable to pinpoint the precise location where they had buried the body. The trial of Jeffrey Willis commenced despite Jessica Herringer's body not being found either alive or deceased. The prosecution presented substantial evidence to charge Willis with her kidnapping and murder. Their case posited that Willis had been stalking Jessica for an extended period. On the night of April 26, 2013, he allegedly parked his vehicle near the service entrance of the gas station. Entering the premises, he is said to have struck Jessica on the head with his gun. During this assault, it's reported that the cover of the gun's laser sight fell off, and Jessica's blood was spilled on the floor. Willis then purportedly dragged Jessica out through the service exit and placed her in the back seat of his car. He transported her to his late grandfather's house where he committed his most horrific acts. Forensic computer analysis revealed that Jeffrey Willis stored photographs and news articles about the search for Jessica on his computer. Following the investigation's progress, it was discovered Willis used a password displayed on the screen consisting of Jessica's initials and the date April 27, 2013, presumed to be the day she died. Willis consistently denied his guilt, insisting he was at home on the night of her kidnapping. His lawyers argued that there was no direct evidence linking him to the case. No DNA belonging to Jessica was found in Willis's house or car. The defense team suggested that her disappearance might be linked to illegal drug trafficking, since Dakota had mentioned Jessica developed a serious substance abuse problem. Despite these arguments, Jeffrey Willis was convicted of murdering Jessica Haringa and received a life sentence without parole. Throughout the trial, he displayed neither remorse nor empathy. His cousin Kevin Bloom was found guilty of assisting in disposing of Jessica's body. Kevin received a sentence of 2 years in prison and 5 years probation. Suspension from his role in the prison system was yet another blow to Jeffrey Willis. Years after his conviction, the narrative around him took a startling twist. He became a suspect in an older, unresolved case. On October 17, 1996, in Fruitport, Michigan, Angela Thorbug, a young woman, was found dead. Her remained at large. Ed Willis, who graduated from the same high school as Angela in 1988, found himself linked to her 1996 murder. In that year, 28-year-old Willis worked as a janitor at his alma mater. Concerns were raised when the principal noticed his excessive time spent in the computer lab during work hours. A check on his computer activities was initiated by the principal. Although the findings remain undisclosed, Willis was asked to resign immediately following the review. The investigation into Angela's murder continues to be shrouded in secrecy. A decade has passed since Jessica hearing his disappearance, and her remains are still undiscovered. This tragedy sparked a legal battle over the custody of her son Zahn, between Jessica's sister and Dakota, her partner. Ultimately, Jessica's biological family is raising Zahn. In addition to custody disputes, Jessica's parents have been key advocates for legislative changes following their daughter's disappearance. Their efforts led to the enactment of a law mandating gas stations operating at night to install surveillance cameras. The goal is to prevent similar incidents in the future. Dennis Andrew Nilsen was born on the 23rd of November, 1945 in Fraserburgh, Aberdeenshire. His parents had a very unhappy marriage. Nilsen later claimed that his beloved grandfather's unexpected death by drowning when he himself was just 6 years old and the traumatic view of the corpse at the funeral led to his psychopathological problems as an adult. His mother went on to remarry and have 4 more children, leaving Nilsen to become withdrawn and lonely. Aware of his hidden homosexuality, he had no sexual encounters as an adolescent due to his fear of humiliation. At age 16, he enlisted in the army. He became a cook and served as a butcher in the Army Catering Corps. It was here that Nilsen learned the skills that served him so well during his 5-year killing spree. After leaving the Army in 1972, Nilsen went into police training. He developed a huge fascination with autopsied bodies in the morgue. Despite this attraction to the dead, or maybe because he became paranoid about it, he resigned and went on to become a recruitment interviewer. Between 1978 and 1983, Nilsen is known to have killed a minimum of 12 men and boys and to have attempted to kill at least 7 others. His initial confession in 1983 indicated that he killed about 16 victims. But because he couldn't remember names or faces specifically, the process of identifying the victims was challenging. The majority of Nilsen's victims were homeless or gay men. Others were heterosexual people he met in bars, on public transport, or outside his own home. All of Nilsen's murders were committed inside 2 North London addresses in Muswell Hill, where he resided during the years of his continuous and ruthless killing spree. One was a house on Melrose Avenue, the second an attic flat in Cranley Gardens. His victims were lured to these addresses through the offer of alcohol, food, money, and most ironically, a safe space to stay. Nielsen usually gave his victims food and alcohol before he strangled them. He used a ligature to attack them, often causing instant death. If the victim had been only strangled into unconsciousness, Nielsen then drowned them in his bathtub, his sink, or a bucket of water. Afterwards, he bathed, clothed, and retained the bodies inside his home for several weeks or months before he dismembered them. Nielsen disposed of the bodies by putting them upon a bonfire. In his later confession to the police, he wrote that he would burn a car tire on top of the human remains to disguise the smell. Nielsen also removed their internal organs and disposed of them separately, burying them at Melrose Avenue and flushing the remains down the toilet at Cranley Gardens. It was exactly this mistake which led to his capture in the end. Nielsen's murders were first discovered by a plumber called Michael Catran, who came to fix the pipes in the building due to complaints made not only by other tenants of Cranley Gardens, but somehow, unbelievably, by Nielsen himself. We can only assume that he was upset that the toilet flush wasn't strong enough to dispose of human blood and organs. Cameron discovered the drain was packed with a flesh-like substance and numerous small bones of unknown origin, and immediately reported his suspicions to his supervisor. Both men called the police the next day. Upon closer inspection, forensic investigators discovered further small bones and scraps of what looked like either human or animal flesh in the same pipe. When confronted with these facts, Nielsen pretended to be shocked and confused, saying, "Good grief, how awful." In response, a police officer present replied, "Don't mess about, where's the rest of the body?" Nielsen responded calmly, admitting that the remains of the bodies could be found in 2 plastic bags in a nearby wardrobe. Nielsen went on to say, "It's a long story, it goes back a long time. I'll tell you everything. I want to get it off my chest. Not here at the police station." He was then arrested and cautioned on suspicion of murder before being taken to Hornsey Police Station. Nielsen admitted to engaging in masturbation as he viewed the nude bodies of several of his victims and to have engaged in sexual acts with 6 of his victims' bodies, but always claimed that he had never penetrated any of his victims as this would be disrespectful to their beauty. The bodies he didn't find beautiful. He just simply discarded under his floorboards. Nielsen was committed to stand trial at the Old Bailey on 6 counts of murder and 2 of attempted murder. He was given a sentence of life imprisonment and died in York Hospital from a pulmonary embolism and extensive hemorrhagic bleeding in 2018. There are conflicting views of Nielsen's psychopathology. These included a lack of emotional development and difficulty expressing any emotion but anger, or a borderline pseudo-normal narcissistic personality disorder with occasional schizoid outbreaks. He was intellectually aware of his actions but not of their nature. The prosecution's own psychiatrist, Paul Bowden, argued that Nielsen was instead a manipulative individual capable of forming relationships, but who had willingly chosen to objectify people, and there could be no excuse for his actions. There are many compelling depictions of this murder case on television, media, and movies. 2 of the most famous are the movie In the Cold Light of Day in 1989 starring Bob Flagg as Nielsen, which was awarded the UCCA Ventisita Award at the 1990 Venice Film Festival, and most recently, The Nielsen Files in 2022, a BBC 2 4-part series re-examining the Metropolitan Police investigation's many mistakes. Regarding the Nielsen murders, Amelia Elizabeth Hobley was born in 1837 in Pile Marsh, Bristol. She was the daughter of a master shoemaker and had multiple siblings. At a young age, Amelia's childhood was interrupted by the mental illness of her mother, caused by typhus. Amelia witnessed her mother's violent fits of insanity, since she herself was the primary caregiver until her mother's death. Researchers later observed that the effect this had on Dyer may have caused trauma, but also that it taught her how to fake mental illness. After her mother's death, Amelia eventually moved into lodgings in Trinity Street, Bristol, where she married George Thomas. After the marriage, Amelia trained as a nurse, a difficult but respectable job in Victorian times, which enabled her to acquire some useful skills. From her contact with a midwife, Ellen Dane, she learned of an easier way to earn a living. by using her own home to provide lodgings for young women who had conceived outside of marriage, and then farming off the babies for adoption or allowing them to die of neglect and malnutrition. Ellen Dane herself was forced to flee to the U.S. shortly after meeting Amelia to escape the attention of the police authorities. Amelia was apparently keen to make money from baby farming, and alongside taking in expectant women, she would advertise to nurse and adopt a baby, in return for a substantial one-off payment and adequate clothing for the child. In her advertisements and meetings with clients, she assured them that she was respectable, married, and that she would provide a safe and loving home for the child. At some point in her baby farming career, Amelia started saving on the expense and inconvenience of slowly letting the children die through neglect and starvation. Soon after the receipt of each child, she quickly murdered them, thus allowing her to pocket most or all of the entire fee in a very short time span. Amelia was eventually caught in 1879 after a doctor became suspicious about the number of child deaths he had been called to certify in Dyer's care. However, instead of being convicted of murder or manslaughter, she was sentenced to 6 months hard labor for neglect. She claimed great mental and emotional trauma due to this nonsensical excuse of a punishment for child murder. Inevitably, she returned to baby farming and murder. Dyer realized the risk of involving doctors to issue death certificates and began disposing of the bodies herself. As another precaution, she and her family frequently relocated to different towns and cities to escape suspicion, to become anonymous, and to acquire new business. Over the years, Dyer used a succession of aliases to entrap desperate young mothers, take their money for child care, and then kill the child and dispose of the body, usually in the River Thames. One of those bodies was found by a bargeman at the river near Reading. It was the body of a baby girl, later identified as Helena Fry. Local police made a crucial breakthrough. As well as finding a label from Temple Mead Station, Bristol, they used a microscopic analysis of the wrapping paper and deciphered a faintly illegible name, Mrs. Thomas, and an address. Mrs. Thomas was a known alias of Amelia Dyer, who had prior record of such crimes and had been suspected by police for years since the sudden escape of her good friend, Ellen Danes, to America. This evidence wasn't enough for charges, but it justified police surveillance. The officers decided to use the young woman as a decoy. Dyer was expecting her new client, the decoy, to call, but instead she found detectives waiting on her doorstep. On April 3rd, Good Friday, police raided her home. They were apparently struck by the stench of human decomposition and plenty of other related evidence, including white edging tape used to strangle the babies, telegrams regarding adoption arrangements, pawn tickets for children's clothing, receipts for advertisements, and letters from mothers inquiring about the well-being of their children. The police calculated that in the previous few months alone, at least 20 children had been placed in the care of a Mrs. Thomas, now revealed to be Amelia Dyer. This rate of murder has led to some estimates that Mrs. Dyer may, over the course of decades, have killed over 400 babies and children, making her the most prolific murderess of all of world history. Amelia Dyer was arrested and charged with murder. Subsequently, the Thames was drained and 6 more bodies were discovered. Dyer's last victims. Each baby had been strangled with white tape, which, as she later told the police, was how you could tell it was one of mine. For the trial, Dyer appeared at the Old Bailey and pleaded guilty to 1 murder only. However, the details of her case were already well known, so she was basically convicted in the court of public opinion on the circumstantial evidence. Additionally, her own daughter had also given graphic evidence that ensured Dyer's conviction. Her insanity defense was thrown out on the grounds that she had a very manipulative but fully aware and intelligent personality, so she was responsible for her actions in the eyes of the law. It is said that it took the jury only 4.5 minutes to find her guilty. Dyer was executed by hanging in June 1896. Although her mental illness defense was clearly fake to avoid punishment, Amelia Dyer really did have a disturbing amount of personality disorder issues. The late 1800s were the period of infancy for modern psychiatry, but today she might be diagnosed with criminal psychopathy, leading to repeated infanticide with a financial motive. She also exhibited some signs of narcissistic personality disorder and a distinct talent for impersonation, manipulation, and lying, arguing a love of performance, but a complete lack of empathy. Amelia Dyer has not really been all that widely represented in popular media, but I do have two interesting facts for you about the aftermath of this case. Firstly, because of some overlap with the time frame of the two cases, a lot of people have wondered if Dyer could secretly also be the hidden hand behind the Jack the Ripper killings. Secondly, I've got another creepy nursery rhyme for you because, well, apparently every time the people of Victorian England heard about a public execution, they always responded with children's poetry about it. Guess it was their generation's version of the club remix. Anyway, here is the nursery rhyme about Amelia Dyer. The old baby farmer, the wretched Miss Dyer, at the Old Bailey her wages is paid. And times long ago we made a big fire and roasted so nicely that wicked old jade. And think we can all agree that's got a certain satisfying ring to it. Stephen Port was born on February 22, 1975, in Southend-on-Sea, Essex, England. From an early age, he was a loner who was often bullied at school. Former teachers have described Port's personality as quiet, while his neighbors described him as having a peculiar childlike personality and exhibiting odd behavior as an adult man, such as playing with children's toys. Port came out as gay in his mid-20s. A former partner of his also described his personality as childish and gave that as the reason for ending their relationship. After leaving school at age 16, he went to art college, but it was too expensive for his parents, so he ended up training as a chef instead. Stephen lived with his parents until his early 30s, then lived alone in a flat in London where he worked as a chef. He even briefly appeared on an episode of the 9th season of the television show, Celebrity Master Chef. He was described as having an athletic appearance at the time of the murders due to regular visits to the gym. Stephen was bald and disguised as in public by wearing a blonde toupee. The hairpiece was professionally fastened and apparently increased his confidence when meeting other men. Part of his strategy was concealment, manipulation, and even identity theft. Stephen used a number of internet hookup sites and apps as a means of initially contacting his victims, including Sleepy Boy, Grindr, Hornet, FitLads, Badoo, Gator, Flirt, Daddy Hunt, Planet Romeo, Manhunt, Slave Boys, and Couchsurfing. He made up false identities and false claims about his background, including one in which he pretended to have graduated from Oxford University and served in the Royal Navy, and another he gave his occupation as a special needs teacher. His drug of choice was gamma-hydroxybutyric acid, or GHB, which is commonly known as the date rape drug. Stephen added it to drinks given to his victim, murdered them in his flat in Barking. Port murdered Anthony Whalegate, 23, a fashion student. Gabriel Kovari, 22, from Slovakia. Daniel Whitworth, 21, a chef. And Jack Taylor, 25, who worked in a bonded warehouse, all between June 2014 and September 2015. The 16-month-long campaign of terror that gripped Britain's LGBTQ+ community had long-lasting implications for police conduct during such cases. In the years that have elapsed, families and friends and loved one of Port's victims have continuously criticized how the Metropolitan Police investigated their deaths. Later on in December of 2021, a searing inquest revealed that there were failures which cannot be overlooked when it came to police handling of the investigation. This is attributed to police prejudice and homophobia in protecting gay communities, where violent deaths go unreported due to the fear of stigma in any case. A BBC One documentary broadcast in March 2017 suggested a catalogue of police failings and the Met's response to the deaths, including overlooking an obviously fake suicide note, implying that one victim had killed another, left by Stephen to cover his own tracks. We completely accept that people's trust in us has been damaged by a number of recent events. What has happened in connection with the deaths of these 4 young men is part of that damage. Back in 2015, was charged with 4 counts of murder and 4 of administering a poison. But at the Old Bailey in June 2016, prosecutors added 6 more counts of administering a poison, 7 charges of rape, and 4 of sexual assault. The judge sentenced Port to life imprisonment with a whole life order, meaning there will be no possibility or appeal for release. Port was incarcerated in HMP Belmarsh. In a harrowing copycat crime in 2019, Gerald Matovu, who is known to have supplied port with the GHB used in those killings, was arrested and later convicted of the murder of actor and businessman Eric Michaels. He was then sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 31 years. Using similar methods to port, Matovu had targeted Michaels on Grindr and had given him a fatal dose of GHB, which continues to be a popular drug for rapists and murderers as of today. Judging from Stephen Port's known history of social skills disorder as a child coupled with an anxiety disorder, body consciousness, and increasing isolation as an adult, it's possible to detect the signs of psychopathic behavior and a borderline personality disorder emerging, where his visible insecurities were being compensated for by secret habits of deception and extreme violence. Due to the callousness of both the murderer and the police investigating the case, it sparked global interest. In 2017, the BBC aired the documentary How Police Missed the Grindr Killer, which went over the botched investigation into Ports's murders. And in 2019, it was announced that the BBC would produce a drama thriller titled The Barking Murders, written by Neil McKay, which would be based on the investigation led by the families of Ports's victims. The series finally aired this year in January of 2022. Peter William Sutcliffe, also known as Peter William Coonan, was born on the 2nd of June, 1946 in Bingley in the West Riding of Yorkshire, the United Kingdom. Peter was the child of a working-class family. One of the Sutcliffe siblings would later reveal that their father was an abusive alcoholic who routinely punished his children by beating them with a heavy belt strap. Always a loner, Peter left school at age 15 and entered the workforce. He worked in a packaging factory as a driver and as a traveling salesman and in other menial jobs. In the 1960s, he even worked as a gravedigger. This was a tiny but grisly preview of what was to come. Some accounts state that Peter, as a young adult, used the services of prostitutes and that he may have been ripped off or robbed by a hooker at least once. This would explain something of his extreme rage against women of the sex worker class later on. Between the years of 1975 to 1980, Peter Sutcliffe murdered 13 women and attacked and severely injured 10 more. These women were mostly prostitutes living and working in the north of England. This led to his nickname of the Yorkshire Ripper in the press, as the original Jack the Ripper also targeted prostitutes. Sutcliffe was finally arrested in Sheffield by South Yorkshire police for driving with false number plates of all things. He confessed to being the perpetrator of the prostitute murders, claiming that the voice of God had sent him on this mission of cleansing sinful women from the world. At his trial, Sutcliffe pleaded not guilty to murder on grounds of diminished responsibility, but he was convicted of murder on a majority verdict. It was only after his trial and conviction that Sutcliffe began using his mother's maiden name of Coonan. He was transferred from prison to Broadmoor Hospital in March 1984 after being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. All his multiple life sentences were combined and his appeal was dismissed, meaning that he would serve a whole life order and never be released from custody. He died in a hospital from COVID-19 related complications in 2020. Sutcliffe showed a number of the signs of a masculine inferiority complex. The symptoms included sexual voyeurism of strangers, an unhealthy obsession with his mother, and hatred and fear of women. A diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia led to the legal decision that he was mentally incompetent to stand trial. Two of the most high-profile media projects on Sutcliffe are the British television crime drama miniseries This Is Personal: The Hunt for the Yorkshire Ripper, released on ITV in the year 2000, and the Netflix docuseries in 4 parts called The Ripper, released in December of 2020, which gives an overview of the police investigation into the murders. Mary Ann Robson was born on October 31st, 1832 at Low Morsley, County Durham, to a working-class family. Her father was a colliery sinker who was later killed in an accident in a coal mine shaft at the Merton Colliery Works. Afterwards, his widow and children were evicted from their home and suffered great financial hardship, even after Mary's mother remarried. As a child, Mary, and was reportedly a most exemplary and regular attender. A girl of innocent disposition and average intelligence, and distinguished for her particularly clean and tidy appearance, according to her Wesleyan Sunday School superintendent, Merton. At 16, Marian left home to become a nurse and later trained as a dressmaker. She left home at 20 after marrying William Malbry, a timekeeper. The couple had 5 children. 5 years later, 4 of the children were dead. The couple moved around before finally settling in Sunderland. During this period, Mary gave birth to another 3 children. Not only did these children die, but so did William Malbray. As a result of the deaths, Mary claimed £35 in insurance payments, a fairly large lump sum in the early 1800s. Later, while Mary was working as a nurse in Sunderland Infirmary, she met and married a patient named George Ward. Ward, an engineer from Sunderland, died 14 months after his wedding. After that, Mary met and married James Robinson, a shipyard foreman. More deaths followed. 2 more of Robinson's children, Mary Ann's remaining child by her first husband, and Mary's mother all died in the early months of 1867. Despite these deaths, and with almost unbelievable faith in her, Robinson married Mary Ann. The couple had 2 more children, one of whom died before reaching its first birthday. The Robinson marriage was not a happy one. Marian got the family into debt, which created conflict with her husband. At some point, it seems that she suggested her husband take out life insurance. Perhaps already suspicious, Robinson refused and Mary left him. In 1870, Mary met and married a Frederick Cotton by his sister, Margaret. The marriage was bigamous and legally invalid, since she was still married to Robinson. A week later, Marian took out insurance on her husband and his 2 sons. The Cottons moved to West Auckland, where a similar pattern started to emerge. Just over a year after they were married, Frederick Cotton became ill and died. Mary already had a new lover, Joseph Natras, who moved in 3 months later. Mary still needed to work, however, and found employment as a nurse to a Mr. Quick Manning, an excise officer who was suffering from smallpox. It was not long before Mary became involved with Quick Manning, and sure enough, in the following weeks, her stepson, son, and Atrocious all died sudden and inexplicable deaths. Mary soon became pregnant with Quick Manning's child, but he refused to marry her. Mary was forced to take in lodgers and find extra work to make ends meet. In the summer of 1872, she was asked by the assistant overseer, Thomas Riley, whether she would be available to look after another smallpox patient. Mary said that this was not possible because she had to take care of her stepson, Charles. She asked Riley whether Charles could enter the workhouse without her, and when told that this was not possible, said something along the lines of, "Perhaps it won't matter, as I won't be troubled for long." Charles died a week later. Riley was so shocked by this convenient coincidence that he reported the matter to the local police. The initial request returned a verdict of death by natural causes, but the doctor ordered to carry out the postmortem had decided to run some tests on the stomach and other organs. These tests revealed the presence of arsenic. Mary Ann was arrested, and some of the bodies of her previous victims were exhumed. Traces of arsenic were found in all of their stomachs. Mary Ann Cotton was charged with the murder of Charles Cotton, Joseph Natras, Frederick Cotton, and Robert Ronson Cotton, although she was eventually tried only for the murder of her stepson, Charles. Mary denied murder, but was found guilty on March 8, 1873, and sentenced to death. Having already given birth to her final child, a girl, in January, there was nothing to prevent the sentence from being carried out. Mary Ann Cotton was hanged on March 24, 1873 in Durham Prison. Although this case comes far ahead of the use of the insanity plea in the United Kingdom criminal justice system, some later research suggests that female serial killers often have a drive that's pretty distinct from their male counterparts. Many seem to act out their crimes in stealthier ways, often using poison and frequently killing for attention, sympathy, financial security, or some combination of the above. This description fits Mary Ann Cotton quite well. A modern diagnosis would indicate a lack of maternal bonding and high-functioning sociopathy, as well as a psychopathic personality disorder appearing in the mix. There have been multiple books, theater, TV, and movie portrayals of Mary and Cotton in the media. In 2015, ITV filmed a two-part television drama called Dark Angel. Inspired by the book Mary and Cotton, Britain's first female serial killer by David Wilson, a criminologist. Another very interesting and creepy contribution to popular culture regarding this case is the following nursery rhyme, which became popular after her execution by hanging. Mary and Cotton. She's dead and she's rotten, lying in bed with her eyes wide open. Sing, sing, oh, what should I sing? Mary and Cotton, she's tied up with string. Where, up in the air, selling black puddings a penny a pair. Mary and Cotton, she's dead and forgotten, lying in bed with her bones all rotten. Sing, sing, what can I sing? Mary and Cotton, tied up with string. Now I do feel I have to warn you now. We at this channel do not advise viewers to sing this to their actual kids. Please use your discretion and curb your creepiness, my friends. In the summer of 1992, Angel Ormston was 17 years old. She lived in the middle-class suburb of Mentor in Lake County, Ohio, where she had been born and nurtured. She attended the neighborhood Mentor High School, just as many other teenagers in Mentor. Known for her beautiful smile and golden blonde hair, Angel was a friendly and outgoing young woman. Her friends described her as a friendly person who enjoyed hanging out with her friends and driving around town while playing music. She was free to move around town anytime she wanted because she had a car of her own. The Great Lakes Mall was a popular destination in the community, and Angel enjoyed spending her leisure time there while also working a part-time job at a burger restaurant there. One fateful afternoon on July 31st, 1992, Angel informed her mother that she would be going to the mall's burger restaurant to pick up her paycheck and run some errands. By the next morning, Angel had not yet arrived home. Since she frequently spent the night at her friend's house, her mother thought she was there at first and no one became concerned. Angel didn't really have rules when it came to checking in with her mother, Jackie, because she wasn't a particularly strict person. Since Angel's mother was aware of her high level of independence, she didn't worry as much as some other parents would have. Angel never had a lot of rules guiding her life because her father, a long-haul truck driver, was also frequently gone from the house. 2 days later, when Angel's older brother went to the mall to do a little shopping, he spotted something that concerned him. In the parking lot of the Great Lakes Mall was the 1981 white-color Honda Civic owned by Angel. He approached Angel's vehicle and peered inside to find her pocketbook and hairbrush lying on the seat. He immediately called their mother, who responded to his call and came to pick up Angel's car. Jackie, their mother, was however still of the opinion that Angel was with Stacy, her best friend. Stacy's residence was the first one she tried to call, but no one picked up. At this point, Angel's mother started to worry and ultimately made the decision to call the police to report her daughter missing. It was now August 2nd, 1992. Angel had last been seen on July 31st. When questioned by the police about why she had delayed so long before reporting her daughter missing, Jackie explained that she believed she had to wait 48 hours before making a report. Jackie once more resorted to Stacy, who was Angel's closest friend and the person most likely to know where Angel was. Stacy and Angel spoke on the phone when they were separated despite spending practically every day together. But on this particular weekend, Stacy had been baking cookies at her sister's place, so she was shocked when Jackie eventually called her. She hasn't seen Angel all weekend and has no idea where she could be. Jackie, who had assumed that her daughter had been with Stacy since she departed on Friday afternoon, was horrified to learn of this. The Mentor police undertake a thorough search right away, and Larry Fisht is named the case's lead detective. He began by thoroughly searching Angel's vehicle, but no indication of foul play was discovered. Additionally, nothing appeared to have been stolen. Instead, it appeared as though Angel had stood up and walked away from her car by herself. However, no one who knew Angel well could comprehend why she would want to pack up and leave town. She was highly loved, outgoing, and popular. She also planned to attend college in the future. Investigators started to look into the idea that Angel may have been taken because there were no indications of a fight. Numerous fingerprints were found on her car when it was dusted for them, but they could all be linked to Angel's friends and relatives. Inadvertently, this made them all suspects. First, Detective Fisher contacted her father's trucking company, but dispatch records indicate that he was out of the state at the time of Angel's disappearance. He then demanded that Jackie undergo a polygraph test. But to the amazement of the detectives, Jackie declined to do so. Jackie and her strange behavior came under closer scrutiny by the detectives. They questioned her about a number of things, including why she took so long to report her daughter missing and if she thought Angel had been the victim of foul play. Why then did she move Angel's car, potentially disrupting any evidence? However, the police lacked concrete evidence against Jackie and were unable to legally compel her to take the polygraph test. The burger business where Angel worked was the last location she claimed to have been to, so the police began to investigate there. When the police arrived, the burger restaurant, Angel's coworkers claimed that she never showed up there that day and that her paycheck was still available. However, when Angel's coworkers revealed to the investigators that they already knew what might have happened to Angel, the investigators became alarmed. They told the detectives about a peculiar male manager they had who enjoyed preying on the young female employees and would frequently linger nearby while they changed into their work uniforms. This manager had been fired for sexual harassment, including instances where he had touched several of the employees in an inappropriate manner. After investigators looked into his background, they discovered that the individual has a history of having contact with minor girls. The employees continued by saying that the manager had a thing for Angel, in particular, and would frequently pay her additional attention, keep an eye on her while she worked, and make lewd remarks about her. They added that he had found every opportunity in the little kitchen to converse with and approach Angel. Due to this recently discovered information, the manager was elevated to the top of the list of suspects. He was promptly located by the police, but he flatly denied any involvement in Angel's disappearance. He claimed he hadn't seen Angel since the two of them had worked together, and that day he had been far from the Great Lakes Mall. He actually had the timesheets to show that he had been employed at another fast food restaurant at the time. The suspicion that the burger restaurant was somehow connected to Angel's disappearance persisted in the minds of the investigators. They questioned the manager and staff members once more and learned a secret that Angel had been hiding from her family. When Angel told her mother she was going to pick up her paycheck, she never mentioned that it would be her last. It appeared that Angel had been fired from her job for consistently being late. Everyone associated with her place of work was eventually cleared. The police was once more back to the very beginning. Angel's friends and family couldn't figure out why anyone would want to hurt her. She was a kind and trustworthy girl who didn't tend to have enemies. Investigators had a tendency to think that her trusting character may have allowed someone to take advantage of her and that she may have left with someone who intended to harm her. Stacy, Angel's best friend, was the last person to see the victim alive in this instance. The last person to see a victim alive is typically the one who has done something sinister. The investigators once again decided that Stacy was definitely a person of interest. Police made the decision to speak with Stacy. They had a 4-hour conversation. Stacy was eager to share all the information she knows with the detectives, but her alibi remained the same. She spent the entire weekend baking at her sister's house. She did provide one potential lead for the detectives, though. She named a student at their school whom she advised the detectives to look into. But the student was Mark Sacca. According to Stacy, 19-year-old Mark Sacca had just received his honors diploma from their school. Mentor High and Angel had a strong admiration for Mark and yearned to be in a relationship with him. Angel's relationship with Mark over the summer was a secret only to her closest friends. The largest secret was revealed by Stacy afterwards. Angel was pregnant with Mark's child. Stacia said that Angel had wanted to tell Mark she was pregnant before she vanished. She had hoped that he would embrace her and want to start a relationship with her and raise the child. However, Mark was scheduled to enroll at Akron University and was alleged to have just been leading Angel on throughout the summer. He didn't seem to be interested in a long-term relationship with Angel. On hearing this, Mark Sacca was rounded up by the police right away to be questioned. Mark was shocked to learn that he was being investigated over the case and insisted that he and Angel were not even dating, let alone that she could be pregnant with his child. He claimed that although they had only ever had one sexual encounter, it had been a long time ago. Then he said he had a girlfriend and had been dating her for 2 years. According to him, he worked until 5 o'clock that Friday and then went to the mall to buy a present for his girlfriend. Later, he then had pizza with friends. Police started investigating his alibi and began by looking into his workplace. They proceeded to Mark's place of employment, and his time card did show that he was speaking the truth about his attendance at work. When they took Mark's shopping route to the stores, they discovered that he could have made the trip in the time he claimed. The friends Mark claimed he linked up with that night were finally approached. They verified they had met for pizza and a movie at 9 o'clock, but Mark was unable to present any witnesses for the shopping outing. Nobody recognized Mark when investigators questioned staff members from the stores he claimed to have gone to. This made the investigators question Mark's account of this time period. Due to this gap in his evening, the detectives asked Mark to take a polygraph examination. He agreed and did really well on the test, proving that he wasn't giving false information in his responses. Mark was no longer considered a suspect as a result of his cooperation and the polygraph test. The police then reverted to the original assumption that Angel either fled town or was kidnapped from her car by a different offender. They suspected Angel may have fled to have her pregnancy alone, since she knew her mother would not approve of an abortion. Once more, there were no leads for the police to pursue until a few weeks later, when a prisoner at the Lake County Detention Center provided a tip. According to him, in Cleveland, there was a prostitute named Angel who fit Angel Ormston's description of a blonde between the ages of 17 and 20, with a lovely smile, and who was found wandering the streets alone. The description was a perfect fit for Angel. The prisoner claimed to have seen Angel moments before his arrest. He continued by saying that a man by the name of Pimp Daddy had employed Angel. When Detective Fisher contacted his Cleveland colleagues, they confirmed that the police in Cleveland were aware of someone going by the name of Pimp Daddy. He operated his business out of a 2-story building on the outskirts of the city. Runaways, strays, and troublesome youths made up his workforce. They had been told not to speak to authorities or divulge their names. Police could only attempt to save Angel once. They made the decision to raid the location, specifically during their busiest hours, which was a Friday evening. Police were able to locate the said girl after a search warrant was approved. While she acknowledged that her name was Angel, she remained silent. The only way to determine if this was the missing Mentor, Ohio resident, Angel Ormston, was to call her mother Jackie and urge her to travel to Cleveland to meet the young woman and maybe identify her as her daughter. Jackie prepared herself for the worst, but it was discovered that the girl was not Angel Ormston when she got there. Nevertheless, this act did result in some good when the little girl's family was found and she was sent home, rescuing her from a life of crime, drugs, and prostitution. In an effort to get Angel's name and story in the media, Jackie, who was inconsolable, invited every local news station into her home. She pleaded for information and begged for assistance in finding her daughter innumerable times. Flyers that Angel's friends created were dispersed across the neighborhood. In order to gather a sum of $10,000 for Angel's safe return, the community turns to local businesses, organizations, and charity for donations. Within a month, the Mentor Police Department received thousands of tips. Police spent a lot of time investigating the tips, but to no avail. Because Jackie believed the police weren't acting quickly enough, the Ormstons had to hire their own private investigator. But this did not provide any results either. After more than 3 months, was still missing. Despite the lack of progress in her situation, her mother remained optimistic. In case Angel ever called home, Jackie left a voice note for her on her answering machine. As the months passed, there was frustration among Angel's family and friends, and rage at the police station intensified. The search for Angel Ormston ended when a local man went hunting with his dog on December 15, 1992. The dog detected a scent during their walk and moved in the direction of a drainage ditch. The man then became aware of a sizable form that was covered in a sheet and had a rope tied around it. He noticed something that appeared to be a human hand when he pulled back the fabric. Despite being severely decomposed, the body had been lying face down for several months when it was discovered by investigators. which is roughly how long Angel has been missing. Green duct tape and an old piece of clothesline were used to bind the corpse. Police were able to identify the body as being that of a female, despite the fact that it was completely unrecognizable. Everyone recognized the person in their hearts. In an effort to identify her killer, the forensic team collected her bones and started digging through the earth for any evidence that could help with the case. The coroner was able to identify Angel Ormston's remains on December 16th, thanks to dental records. The small town's residents were shocked when the news of Angel's murder traveled throughout the community. An autopsy revealed that Angel had suffered a traumatic head injury as well as 2 stab wounds to the chest. Those stab wounds were determined to be the cause of death by the coroner. She had been violently and angrily stabbed. At least the police had physical evidence by this point to try to identify the murderer. The forensic team was able to retrieve a blue piece of carpet fibers which was stuck to the duct tape. In their search for the matching blue carpet, police put together a list of all the houses associated with Angel, including her family and friends. One of those residences belonged to Mark Satka's parents. The boy Angel had been seeing all summer. The house was empty at the time of Angel's murder since it was up for sale, but Mark had been spotted using it. There were only 2 persons with the keys at that time, Mark and his mother. When the police went over to the house to look at it, they discovered it had been sold, but they were permitted by the new owners to search the house. The owners have entirely renovated the house, with the exception of 2 rooms and the basement. Investigators observed blue carpet squares on the steps as they descended into the basement. They then took some samples to compare with the blue carpet fibers discovered on Angel's remains. They also observed that a part of the laundry room clothing line had been removed. This was also hurriedly processed in the lab, and the findings support their suspicions. There was a match. The carpets, stairs, and walls of the basement all had small blood stains, and a bloody thumbprint was also obtained for testing. The police soon arrested Mark Satka for Angel's murder the day after they found his basement of horrors. His arrest came 5 months after Angel Ormston vanished. Mark was still acting defiantly, and was attempting to persuade the police that they lacked sufficient proof to prosecute him. Investigators were looking at his car at the same time. Even though Mark had made an effort to thoroughly wash his car, the job fell short. The exact roll of green duct tape that was used to bind Angel was still in his car, along with remnants of blood in the trunk. After being challenged by Detective Fisher with all of these tangible evidence against him, Mark finally acknowledged doing something stupid. When asked what stupid thing he did, he said that he killed Angel. He claimed that he brought Angel to the house with the purpose of having intercourse with her, but that he became angry when she revealed that she was pregnant and that he was the father. When Angel refused to get the abortion he insisted she have, he got angry and knocked her to the ground by his repeated punches. He hurried up the stairs and raced to the garage to retrieve a knife and stabbed her twice. Detectives questioned if Angel was alive or dead before he stabbed her. He responded that she was alive since he could see her breathing. Mark then dragged her up the stairs after wrapping her body and tying a laundry line around her legs. She was placed in his car and he drove to the woods to discard her body there. He went back home to clean up before going to dinner with his friends. The entire time that Mark had been eating pepperoni pizza and having fun with his friends, Angel's body had been lying in a shallow grave. After Mark's interview and confessions, he was accused of killing Angel. The news was quite gratifying to Angel's loved ones. Mark guided authorities to the roadside spot where he threw Angel's car keys before leading them to a remote location where he discarded the knife, which was never found. Mark had a very clear reason for killing Angel. In Mark's eyes, Angel represented a step in the wrong path. Despite the fact that he had no affections for Angel, he would have to provide for her and their child. In February 1993, Mark entered a guilty plea to aggravated murder and kidnapping so that he could avoid a death penalty. Earlier in the investigation, he was able to pass the polygraph due to his lack of conscience, and he has since displayed no regret. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.